This is the Business Experience Show, where we connect those who want to know more about digital marketing, social media, and business strategy with entrepreneurs who are succeeding in today's marketplace. Follow our blog, join our online network, or connect with us at thebusinessexperienceshow.com. And now, your host, Lisa Caprelli.
Welcome to the Business Experience Show. I'm Lisa Caprelli, your host. Here with me is producer Brian Gapps and certified financial planner and president of Quintessential Financial, Scott Shire.
Hello.
Hello, Lisa.
Joining us by telephone is Phil Ehrlich. He's an attorney all the way from New York, here to talk about mistakes that people make when starting a business. Welcome, Mr. Phil Ehrlich.
Thank you.
So, Phil, tell us about your background and practice.
Well, I guess I graduated from Syracuse University with a BS in finance and also a JD, law degree. And I went into practice here in New York, and I'm a transactional corporate lawyer. I have about a 20 years plus experience. Right now, I'm at one of the top 10 largest firms in the world.
Wow.
Here, we're a full service multinational firm. We have 40 offices in over 20 countries. And my practice consists primarily of representing entrepreneurs, startups, established corporate clients, and financial institutions, including private equity funds and hedge funds, commercial lenders, and insurance companies, in connection with capital raises, mergers and acquisitions, secured lending transactions, restructurings, and general corporate and commercial transactions, both with a focus here on the United States. And also, I have a good portion of my practice is representing both domestic and foreign clients in connection with cross-border transactions.
You've done a lot, Phil, and I want to say, in reading about you, you graduated cum laude from Syracuse. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
A really smart guy, and I want to say to our audience, Phil is really a down-to-earth guy. Like, it sounds like he's done all these amazing things, represented some great companies around the world. And, he's a really down-to-earth guy, and we're happy to have him share with you mistakes people make when starting a business.
There are certainly a lot of mistakes that can and will be made by business owners, especially when starting up. But I think you're here to talk about some of the really big ones and that can and should be avoided. But because by the time you hear about problems like these, they really are big problems.
That's true. I mean, you've got, when people come to me, at least they come to me initially, they've typically gotten over the social, emotional, and financial issues related to starting a business. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people have come from large corporations where they have a steady paycheck and they're used to levels of management where people basically tell them what to do. When they come to me, oftentimes for the first time, they find themselves that they're their own boss, and they don't have a steady paycheck coming in, and so it's sort of unfamiliar territory, and there are a number of recurring issues that not just me, but I think other attorneys and people that work in the startup space find that, and they keep repeating themselves, even though we try to counsel people, and even you can look in some of the entrepreneurial magazines like Forbes and Entrepreneur Magazine, and they have guidance, but I think people still seem to focus or have the same issues, and I think a couple of them I think we can touch on here. One of them, which actually comes up a lot, is for people that are trying to start businesses in a partnership. And I think the issue there is a lot of people, they just want to go, they've decided they want to do this and they want to go all in. And so rather than getting their toes wet, they commit themselves to a sort of a partnership arrangements with another person. And I think most times it's prudent to start the relationship slowly. And as you do that, prepare yourself for the next steps, as opposed to going all in and investing everything in this relationship. I mean, it's almost like dating to a certain extent. You probably should date a little bit first before you get engaged or you become married.
Well, Phil, and I've always heard a partnership was just a divorce that hasn't happened yet.
That's true to a certain extent. But I think once you've done that, if you've done that, I think the first step, and this sounds like a self-serving message, is that I think you need to get an experienced lawyer and an experienced accountant involved, at least for the formation of the business, or I should say the basic formation of the business. and that is really just someone to set up the entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC or some other type of entity, and also to advise you if there's any sort of intellectual property that's being transferred. You want to make sure that from a legal standpoint it's transferred correctly, and you also want to make sure from an accounting standpoint that it's transferred correctly, so that the entity will have the proper tax basis and can take advantage of whatever tax attributes there may be from that asset. And that's the big thing. Now, a lot of times people don't do that because of expense to start off with, but it usually is not that expensive. And if you've made the decision that you're going to go down the route, it's worthwhile for that investment, at least at the start.
And I understand that, and I understand the expense. And is that something, I know you'd want to do that at the beginning, but let's say you did dive in and get started with your business. That's something you could maybe revisit just a little bit. I mean, not too far down the road, but...
Yes, you definitely could revisit it, and there are a lot of times. I mean, a lot of this stuff is really it's a fluid process, because there'll be times from time to time that you'll need to talk to a lawyer or an accountant when certain issues or potential transactions come up.
Phil, I want to say that people often put too much value on their idea. Like, for example, I hear all the time in working with different clients, or people come to me all the time, I have this great business idea. My idea is worth millions of dollars. Well, it's only the execution of the idea that is worth money.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I have people come to me all the time with ideas that may be great ideas, but I don't think they realize that it really takes product development and marketing and distribution in order to realize that value. I mean, this often comes up when the people are trying to raise money, either angel capital or even sometimes traditional venture capital. And what they do is they may have an unrealistic valuation of the business, because they may have a friend that started a business a couple of years ago, and his company is worth a tremendous amount of money, and his idea and the client thinks that his idea is better than his friend's idea. The problem is that valuations, first of all, they can be very speculative, but also the valuation depends on a lot on where you are in the cycle. And also whether or not, if you have access to certain capital, that makes your company more valuable. A couple of years ago, I had two young guys in the late 20s in connection with a potential startup that came to me. Actually, the client was the potential investor that came to me, but we were unable to get a deal done because they were valuing their idea so highly that it was impossible to get anything done with him, and they also demanded such control rights that the investor said that he just couldn't do it from that standpoint. And what they have to understand is that when an investor, the investor's paying not only for the idea, but they also are paying for some of the groundwork that's been done.
I feel like you almost have to be the Shark Tank. So you have to be, the panel of guys as they're coming in, and you have to hit them with all those questions before they start trying to take it out to the actual angel investors.
That's right, and that's what you try to do, and it goes in. We can talk about a business plan after a little bit later, but it goes in with that, is that you have to have a fully baked plan to present. In this case with these guys, they had a great idea, but they hadn't dedicated the time that was necessary here. I mean, they basically wanted to step in from a standing start to a company that had a very, very high valuation. Yet they hadn't left their jobs yet, and weren't willing to leave their jobs until they were put in a position where money had been invested and they had substantial or significant salaries to support them. And that's different than the typical startup where people are sacrificing personally in order because they believe in the idea for the business. The process really starts that they need to start it is to have a fully developed business plan. The only way you're going to raise money is with a fully developed business plan, and it really has to be fluid. It has to be fluid in terms of to address changes in the financial environment, in the industry, and in technology. And it needs to fully explain how you're going to fund the business, how you're going to market the products, how the milestones, because you need to establish milestones in order to get credibility. But you'll need to explain how they're going to be met, and then you ultimately need to explain how and when the company's going to start making money. That's ultimately for any investor. That's the bottom line.
Now, Phil, I would imagine there's a lot of online resources that people could use to start the structure of a business plan, but eventually they got to meet with somebody that's got experience like yourself to really flesh it out and make it real for their situation.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of incubators and other in venture capital societies and the like that can help to a certain extent, but it is a lot of work, and it's got to be specifically tailored to the industry and to the investors that they're focusing on.
And through the years, what I've learned from you, Phil, is there's no cookie-cutter approach. There's no one-size-fits-all, hire attorney in a box, and this is exactly what's going to be your business future by hiring me.
That's absolutely right. I mean, a lot of laymen or laywomen believe that you go to a lawyer and you tell him what you want in 5 minutes. He can just press a button and magically he'll have a document that addresses all your concerns. Nothing is further from the truth. I mean, I guess when you go into business with someone, or even by yourself, I mean, I think you need to think of these documents as sort of your living will or your prenup agreement, because I think what's going to happen, and they need to be revisited, as financial planners will tell you from time to time, and that they need to be revisited from time to time as things change. And you don't necessarily need these full-blown or fully baked documents when you start the business. But I think if you're thinking of or have dedicated significant financial resources and time, it's really highly recommended that you go to a lawyer that has experience and even an accountant that has experience in this area. I mean, I really can't stress that enough, because I've had so many situations where people have spent tremendous amounts of time and money on the business, and yet hadn't focused on the actual the need to document sort of the exit strategies. I mean, I had a situation a couple of years ago where two partners, or two people that were in the financial consulting business, and they were relatively well known in their field, formed a partnership. So we did a document, and we basically punted on the sort of exit strategies if one person didn't like it, or they didn't get along, or wasn't dedicating the time necessary to run the business. And unfortunately, that they decided last year to terminate the business. And now, fortunately, we were able to negotiate with them a sort of a settlement arrangement and a separation agreement, and there was no there was no bad feelings between them. But that's sort of rare. It's like a marriage. When it breaks up, even if it's just because people just didn't get along just in general and there was no really malevolence, particularly when you're dealing with money, it can be very complicated and very trying emotionally as well as financially.
Phil, you kind of allude to one thing that can be a problem for people is when they throw out equity ownership to a variety of people. I always think, well, that's a cheap way to get buy-in from others, but it can create a big headache then in the end.
Yeah, I mean, many times, I mean, people view it as currency, and so you're able to give somebody upside potential and some, sort of compensation. There are a number of problems that arise with that, particularly logistical problems from a securities law standpoint, and particularly in California. California probably has one of the most comprehensive, what we refer to as blue sky state securities laws. And whenever I have any sort of project that touches California, I always almost immediately get someone from one of our California offices that is experienced in California securities laws. Even on projects that are only tangentially related to California, it often involves getting California counsel to make sure we address those issues.
Well, thank you, Phil. You shared a wealth of information for the Business Experience Show listeners. I'm going to sum up the 5 points you said. So listen, if you are starting a business or you're in the process with partners, you want to make sure you have an experienced lawyer and accountant from the beginning. That's number one. Number two, people put too much value on their idea. Number three, people often don't have a fully developed business plan. Number four, you have to be careful about giving equity. Typically, as part of an equity incentive plan, people sometimes maybe want to give too much equity away, too little. Talk to your attorney. And then number five, you need to plan your exit separation strategy. And real quick on planning your exit or separation strategy and partnership, give me final words on 50-50 partnerships versus 51%, 49%, Phil.
Oh, I think 50-50, it's probably the toughest situation because no one has control. And so you need to spend a significant amount of time trying to figure out what makes sense if there's a deadlock and how to resolve that, whether it's a dissolution of the business or have require one partner to buy out the other partner. That can be very complicated and take a significant amount of time just to figure out how you want to address that.
Thank you for being with us, Phil Ehrlich, all the way from New York, attorney who represents some clients from all over the world. Thanks for sharing your information. For more information, you can go directly to thebusinessexperienceshow.com, thebusinessexperienceshow.com. We also post this information on our blog. Thank you so much, Phil Ehrlich, attorney from New York. Thank you, Brian Gapp, Scottshire. You're listening to the Business Experience Show on Angels Radio AM 830 KLAA. Hey, Phil.
Hey.
See how easy that was?
Was that okay?
Yeah, that was really good. You got it, everything?
You got to do it all over again.
Too fast.
We got to do it all over again. That was just a warm-up.
That was a warm-up.
Forgot to record it.
Shut up.
Many of today's print magazines also exist in digital format for your computer or mobile device. And best of all, most online versions are free. Check out these favorites. Blue Canvas magazines for those interested in art and graphic design at bluecanvas.com. Singular Magazine, your lifestyle guide for savvy singles at singularcity.com. Eloquent Woman magazine infuses Southern California women's fashion with an enriching dose of healthy self-confidence at eloquentwoman.com. The legendary Famous Monsters of Filmland, for fans of horror, fantasy, and sci-fi, rose from the dead to the delight of fanboys and girls worldwide at famousmonsters.com. In addition, these magazines often have online communities, forums, and bonus content. Remember this season's magazine favorites: bluecanvas.com, singularcity.com, eloquentwoman.com, famousmonsters.com. Start reading and enjoying today.